Hello, good morning, everybody. It's Miss Scott here, and I just wanted to walk you through a couple of things from chapters 7 through 12 of Holes, which you should have read. I hope so. So we're just going to walk through a couple things. It shouldn't take too long. I have my paper copy of the book here, so that's kind of what I'll be looking at, but I'll also be showing you what's on my screen. So our big skills that we're looking at this sort of section of chapters is summarizing, talking about interweaving stories. So I earlier, when we were doing this, we were talking on Tuesday. I talked a little bit about how, let's see, what color should we do? Let's do some green. About how a lot of times there might be more than one plot happening at a time within a story. So there might be a smaller plot and then a bigger plot. So there could be one within the other. That's kind of hard to see. But that's something that we started in our story today, right? When we were reading about Elia Yelnats and Madame Zeroni. That's a story within a story, which is really, really cool. And then we're also going to be talking a little bit about theme. But before we do that, I actually want to walk through some examples of figurative language in our story. So I'm going to make myself a little bit smaller. The first example of figurative language that I found in our story was actually where we are watching Stanley dig the holes, okay? And he says at one point, come on, he says, only 10 million more to go. Now, Stanley probably doesn't have to dig or shovel 10 million times to dig a hole. That's exaggeration. So we would consider that to be hyperbole, okay, which is really, really important. Another example is when we get down here into the story about Elia Yelnats and Myra Minke, who he's in love with. It talks about how he loves her and he goes to visit Myra Minke, and then Madame Zeroni says, Myra's head is as empty as a flower pot. Now, her head's really not as empty as a flower pot. Like, there's a brain in there. So this is another example of, it could be both like a simile, right? Her head is as empty as a flower pot, which is a really funny simile. I might start using that. Another example, okay, of a different type of figurative language is when we kind of go back to Stanley. So we sort of do this flashback and then we come back to Stanley. And right here, I'm going to use some blue. Stanley's talking about how he feels when he's picking up his canteen. So he's picking his canteen, he's feeling dizzy, he's putting his hands on his knees. He's like feeling like he's going to throw up, and then he just like sees his blisters on his hand. That's like a moment of visualization for us as the reader, right? Like, we're supposed to be visualizing and feeling that with Stanley at the moment. That's a type of sensory detail, figurative language. Below that, there's something else that I noticed with Mr. Sir. Okay. There is a saying that Mr. Sir keeps saying, and he keeps saying, this isn't the Girl Scouts, is it? That's pretty interesting to me because I know that we talked a lot around like Halloween in October about repetition, right? And about how characters might repeat things or do things over and over and over to sort of clarify a point. This is an example of that, right? Mr. Sir keeps saying, hey, this ain't no Girl Scout camp, over and over and over and over. I think he's trying to prove a point. I don't know. Keep an eye out for him saying that. Keep an eye out for that repetition. Okay. And then at the end of chapter 7, sort of, right about here, okay, it talks about how Elia was supposed to carry the pig up the mountain every single day, but he skipped it on the last day because he wanted to impress Myra. And then there's kind of a lesson there, right? Myra's not that, he's impressed with Elia, but he's just as impressed with Igor Barkov because Elia didn't do exactly what he was supposed to do, right? He was supposed to carry the pig up the mountain. He was supposed to carry Madame Zeroni up the mountain. He didn't do it every day. And so because he didn't do the work that he needed to do every day, things didn't turn out like they were supposed to. There's a lesson there for you. Now, it's not going to have Igor Barkov's name. It's not going to have Elia's name. It's not going to have holes in it. It's not going to be about Madame Zeroni. But there's a lesson that you should kind of be aware of. So towards the end of chapter 7, you might want to go back and take a look at that. Okay. The theme is showing up here, one of them at least. Because when we talk about theme, right, my big story might have a theme. It might have a lesson that the author wants to teach me. I know this is a little hard to see. So the big story about Stanley and Camp Green Lake might have a theme. But then my smaller story about Elia and Madame Zeroni and the pig, that might also have a theme too. They could be the same theme, but they could be more than one lesson the author wants to teach us. Really, really interesting stuff. A couple other things, okay? There's definitely like a lot of other examples of visualization as we keep reading. For sure. I know when they talk about the rec room in chapter, let's see. Oh, I don't remember. In chapter 9, they talk about the rec room, but it's WRECK room. That's an example of a homonym. Rec and recreation, sound the same. So there are two words that sound the same, even if they're spelled different and they mean different things. There's also some repetition with Stanley. So it keeps talking about how he's shrugging his shoulder over and over and over. Keep that in mind. Anytime you see that, take a look at it. Just take note. Yeah. So that's kind of our big things for this week. I wanted to talk about summary. Now that we know that there's more than one storyline happening, we got to kind of keep track of it. So I'm going to put my big old poster here. Woo! It's a big poster. Can you see that? Probably not. It's really hard to arrange things at my house, guys. Like, I am not an arranger, and nothing I own is like heavy enough to hold this stuff. Okay. We'll have to make do. So if you look down here, we have our setting, Camp Green Lake. We have our character, Stanley. We have our problem. Stanley's going to prison at Camp Green Lake. But now we have this smaller sort of situation. So we have a smaller situation where we have Elia. He's back in the home country. And his problem is that he wants to marry Myra Minky. Okay. So keep that in mind as we're kind of moving through. He wants to marry Myra. And right now, his big problem seems like he didn't put the work in that he was supposed to, according to Madame Zeroni, to get to marry him. So keep that in mind as we're reading. We will keep moving forward. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to make myself a little bigger so you can see me. Please let me know if you have any questions. We're going to keep churning forward with this, and that's it. All right. Bye. Love you guys. See you later. Be safe.